At my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law's mother gave her a gift I will never forget. A maid's uniform. My son-in-law didn't just refuse to defend my daughter. He laughed and said, "Perfect. She'll need this to keep the house clean." My daughter endured it, silent, tears streaming down her face. But I didn't. I stood up and handed my daughter a box. "Now open my gift," I said. When everyone saw what was inside that box, the entire room fell silent in shock. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What time is it there? If this video is reaching you, it means you need to hear it. Just like Angela's phone call saved my daughter's life, your comment might save someone else's. 3 months before Tessa's wedding, my phone rang. It was my sister Angela, the younger one, though we hadn't really talked in years. Her voice came through tight, fractured, like something that hadn't been used in a very long time. "Benson, I need to tell you something, before it's too late." I met her that afternoon at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. I almost didn't recognize my own sister. Angela looked like she'd aged a decade in the 15 years since I'd last really seen her. Not physically, though God knows she looked tired. It was something deeper, like someone had slowly erased her from the inside out. She ordered chamomile tea and didn't touch it. "I have nothing," she said without preamble. "You understand nothing. The house is his. The car is his. The bank account's all his name. Angela, let me finish." Her hands wrapped around the untouched cup. I gave him everything. My career, my friends, my family. And when I finally asked for a divorce, I discovered I'd given him everything that mattered. She told me about Diane then, Adam's mother, how she'd encouraged her son to protect Angela, how control in Diane's world was another word for love. 15 years, Benson, Angela whispered. 15 years of asking permission. Permission to see my friends. Permission to work. Permission to exist. I watched my sister's hands shake around that cup, and something cold settled in my stomach. "Tessa's marrying Adam," I said carefully. Angela's eyes met mine. That was when I saw the fear raw and honest. "That's why I called you," she said. "If you don't protect her now, she'll end up exactly like me. Invisible. Dependent. Trapped." She leaned across the table, and I could see the desperation in every line of her face. "She needs her own house, Benson. Legal documents. Something with her name on it, only her name. An escape route. She needs to know before it's too late that she has choices. I'm talking about giving her what I never had. A way out." I drove home that evening with Angela's words circling in my mind like vultures. My sister, intelligent, accomplished, beautiful, had become a cautionary tale. A warning written in her own tired eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a blank piece of paper, and I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to do what my father should have done for Angela. I was going to give my daughter a choice, even if it cost me everything. I was 67 years old, with 1 pension, 1 car, and 3 months. So I did what any father would do. I started selling the life I'd built. The first thing I sold was Margaret's jewelry box. I held the worn leather like it was sacred. 40 years of marriage sitting in my hands, pearls, white gold earrings, a small diamond ring. I whispered an apology to my late wife and sold them at 3 different jewelry stores. Then came the Nissan Suru. 8 years of fixing her myself, knowing every creak of her engine. A young couple bought her for their baby. I showed them how to check the oil and told them she'd last forever if they cared for her. Then I started taking the bus. My feet hurt in ways I hadn't remembered pain could hurt, but every ache reminded me of Tessa. On weekends I taught computer basics to seniors, checking email video, calling grandchildren. The pay was minimal, but it was something. 3 months of exhaustion. 3 months of living on coffee and determination. I met James Richardson in a small law office downtown. He was precise, careful, the kind of lawyer you want, handling something this important. I explained what I wanted: a house under Tessa's name alone. No exceptions, no joint ownership, no escape clause for her husband. James took off his reading glasses and looked at me directly. "That's unusual, Benson, and it could create tension in the marriage." "I know," I said, "but it has to be this way." "What?" I told him about Angela, about 15 years of invisible erosion, about asking permission to exist. James nodded slowly. "I understand. Let's make sure this is airtight." We found the house in Ballard on a Tuesday afternoon. It was small, 2 stories, a modest garden, a water view from the back patio. The real estate agent wanted to show me larger properties, but I shook my head. This one was perfect. This one felt like freedom. I signed the papers 3 weeks before the wedding. The house was now legally completely only Tessa's. No one could take it from her, and she didn't even know it existed. The day of the wedding arrived in a blur of white flowers and expensive suits. I sat in the front row with a small box in my jacket pocket, my hand touching it every few minutes to make sure it was real. Tessa looked beautiful. She always did. But as I watched her walk down the aisle, I saw something I hadn't wanted to see, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Just for a second. Just enough that my father's instinct recognized it as fear. The reception was flawless. Catered, expensive, everything designed to impress. Diane made sure everyone knew the Thorns had paid for it all. Then Diane stood up. She held a box wrapped in expensive paper. Smiled that smile I'd come to recognize, the smile of someone who was about to humiliate you publicly and call it love. For our new daughter-in-law, she announced loud enough for 200 people to hear. Something practical. A proper wife understands her place. She opened the box slowly, deliberately. A maid's uniform, navy blue with a white apron. The room went quiet in a way that made my blood run cold. Adam laughed. He actually laughed and said, "Perfect. She'll need this to keep the house clean." I watched my daughter's face. I watched her eyes fill with tears. I watched her try to smile, try to pretend this was funny, try to make it okay. That's when I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't storm. I simply stood slowly and deliberately, and every eye in that ballroom turned to me. I walked to my daughter. I took the uniform from Adam's hands and threw it on the table. Then I pulled out the small box from my jacket pocket. "My daughter deserves a real gift," I said, my voice steady and clear. I opened the box and handed Tessa the deed. Her hands shook as she took it. Her eyes moved across the words, confused, at first, then understanding, then filled with tears. But this time, different tears. "Read it," I said quietly. "Read it out loud." Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Property deed, owner Tessa Marie Bradley. Address 2847 Ballard Avenue, Seattle, Washington." The room was absolutely silent. 200 people, frozen. Diane's face turning from shocked to furious. Adam's expression shifting from amusement to something darker, something that looked like fear. And I realized they'd just lost control. Edward Thorne. Adam's father slowly stood. He was 72 years old, and I could see 40 years of regret written across his face. The room watched him. Everyone sensed something was about to shift. He walked over to where Tessa sat, still holding the deed, still trembling. He looked at her with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between pride and profound sadness. "You're a fortunate young woman," he said quietly. "A very fortunate young woman." Tessa looked up at him confused. Edward's eyes moved to me. My daughter never had this kind of fortune. The reception had gone completely silent. 200 people had learned how to hold their breath. My daughter married young. Edward continued, his voice steady, but thick with something I recognized as pain. "She married a good man. That's what we all told her. A good provider, a good family, but good men can still be as controlling." Diane shifted in her seat. I could see her understanding where this was going. "Fait pas que sur 15 years," Edward said. 15 years of asking permission. Permission to see her friends. Permission to work. Permission to be herself. He looked back at me. When she finally left, she had nothing. No house, no savings, no options. And He paused. His jaw tightened. "I should have done what you just did. I should have protected her the way you're protecting your daughter." He put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, and I could feel the weight of all those wasted years. "You did the right thing, Benson," he said. "I'm sorry my son isn't better." That's when Diane exploded. "Ernesto." Her voice cracked like a whip. "How dare you? This is our family." Edward turned to face his wife. For a moment they locked eyes. I could see something shift between them. Something that had probably been building for decades. He simply sat back down. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just sat down and turned his attention to his plate, completely dismissing his wife's outrage. And that's when I saw Adam's face truly change. The smile was gone. His jaw went tight. His eyes went dark with something that looked less like love for his new bride and more like calculation. He leaned over and whispered something to his mother, something urgent and low. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew what he was thinking. He'd lost control of the narrative. He'd lost the family's public support. And he'd just realized that the house his new wife owned, the house she didn't know existed until tonight, had just become a line he could not cross. He'd just become our enemy. After the honeymoon, I realized I was losing my daughter. The first sign was simple. Her phone calls became shorter. Where she used to ramble about her week, the funny thing that happened at work, a new recipe she tried, that dream she had about traveling to Costa Rica, now there were only monosyllables. Hi, Dad. How are you, sweetheart? Good. Adam needs me. Click. I told myself it was normal. Newlyweds needed time together. I convinced myself I wasn't being pushed out. I was simply making space. But then Brittany called me. Brittany Cole had been Tessa's best friend since high school. They'd worked together at the same marketing firm. Brittany's voice on the phone was cautious, like she was testing ice before stepping on it. Benson, I probably shouldn't call, but Tessa asked me not to contact her anymore. My stomach dropped. What? Adam said her friendships were affecting their marriage. He said she needed to focus on being a wife now. And Tessa. Brittany paused. Tessa just agreed. Just like that. That's when I drove to Tessa's house unannounced. She answered the door in clothes I'd never seen before, conservative. Muted. Nothing like the colorful, confident woman I knew. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She looked smaller somehow. Hi, Dad, she said, but her eyes moved behind her to check if Adam was watching. How's work? I asked casually, as if I didn't already know something was wrong. Oh, I quit, actually. My heart did something that hurt. You quit, Tessa. You loved that job. I know, but Adam thinks it's better if I prepare for the future. For children. He wants me focused on home. She said it all very calmly. Too calmly. Like she'd rehearsed it. That evening I called Nancy Chapman Benson's sister, my support system, and I told her everything. The shortened phone calls. The friendships ended. The job abandoned. The way Tessa couldn't look me in the eye anymore. Nancy was quiet for a long moment. That's classic abuse, Benson, she said finally. Isolation. No job means no money. No money means no independence. No independence means no escape. He's isolating her. I said the reality of it crashing down on me like a wave. He's building a cage, Nancy corrected. And the worst part, she can't see the bars yet. I hung up the phone shaking. All those legal documents, all that planning. The house I'd sacrificed everything for, and it meant nothing if my daughter was too afraid, too isolated, too dependent to use it. Adam had learned something from his family's public humiliation. He'd learned to work quietly, to control not through grand gestures, but through small daily erosions, permission structures, financial starvation, social isolation. The house on Ballard was sitting empty in her name, and she was disappearing anyway. I realized that night that the deed alone wasn't enough. My daughter didn't just need a way out, she needed to know she deserved to take it. We sat in James Richardson's office on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Same lawyer who'd drafted the house deed 3 months ago. Only this time we weren't there to secure Tessa's future. We were there to save her present. Tessa was nervous, glancing at the door constantly. When James walked in professional kind in that measured way lawyers learn to be, she tensed. Does Adam know you're here? I asked quietly. No, Tessa whispered. He thinks I'm at a doctor's appointment. James placed the house deed on the table. This property is yours, completely, legally. Your husband has no claim on it. He didn't wait for her to absorb it. Does he monitor your phone, your location, your friendships? Tessa nodded to each question, tears filling her eyes. What you're describing is psychological abuse, James said. It's illegal. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't control. But he says he loves me, Tessa said, voice breaking. He's protecting me. Protection doesn't look like a prison, James replied. This is control, nothing more. He pulled out another document. Do you want to file for divorce? Tessa looked at me. In that moment, I saw my daughter recognize herself again, not as Adam's wife, as Tessa. Yes, she whispered. We left with the paperwork an hour later. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. Adam's car was already there. He knew something was wrong the moment we walked in. His eyes moved from Tessa to me, calculating predatory. Where have you been? Before she could answer, he saw the envelope. He grabbed her purse, pulled out the divorce papers, read the first line. His face transformed into something darker than anger. Bah, divorce papers. His voice was barely a whisper. He grabbed Tessa's arm and pulled her toward the stairs. Upstairs. Now. Adam, please. He dragged her into the bedroom and slammed the door. The deadbolt turned from outside. I heard Tessa pound on the door. Adam, let me out. Nothing. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys and walked out. Adam didn't stop me. I sat in my car, parked down the street, engine running, phone in my trembling hand. I couldn't leave my daughter alone with him. Not now. The minutes felt like hours. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every cell in my body screamed to go back. In there. Break that door down. Pull my daughter out. But I forced myself to stay calm. The law was our weapon now. I just had to wait. At 11:17 p.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But I knew that voice, Tessa whispering, "Dad, he locked me in. I can't get out. Please save me." When Tessa's terrified whisper came through my phone, "Dad, he locked me in," I didn't hesitate. I hung up and dialed 911. "My daughter is being held against her will," I said. "She's locked in a bedroom. She's in danger. I'm sending the address now." The operator's voice was calm, professional. "Units are dispatched. They're 3 minutes out." I drove faster than I should have. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard they hurt. Every second felt like a lifetime. When I pulled up to the house, 2 police cars were already there, lights silent but urgent. Officers were heading toward the front door. I got out of my car and ran. One of the officers, a woman with her hand on her belt, stopped me. "Are you the father?" "Yes, my daughter, she's upstairs. She's locked in." "We know. We're going in." They moved through the house with practiced precision. I followed. Upstairs, down the hall. That was when Adam appeared, blocking the bedroom door. "This is my house," he said, his voice steady, calculating. "She's my wife. There's nothing illegal here." The officer badge reading Martinez looked at him directly. "Is the door locked from the outside?" Adam's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. "That's false imprisonment," Officer Martinez said. "It's a felony in Washington state." From inside the room, Tessa's voice broke through. Desperate, small, terrified. "He locked me in. Please, please help me." Officer Martinez nodded to her partner. He pulled out a tool, practiced, efficient, and broke the lock. The door swung open. Tessa stumbled out, tears streaming down her face. She looked for me, and the moment our eyes met, she ran. She crashed into my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her like I could protect her from ever being hurt again. "You're safe?" I said into her hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." I didn't realize I was crying. Officer Martinez turned to Adam, her voice steady and cold. "You're under arrest for false imprisonment and domestic violence. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they cuffed him, Adam looked at me. His eyes burned with something dark, rage, disbelief, desperation. "You destroyed everything," he said. "You destroyed us." I held my daughter tighter and looked him straight in the eye. "No, Adam, you did. I just saved my daughter." As they led him to the police car, Tessa clung to me like she'd never let go. Her whole body shook with relief, with fear finally released, with the knowledge that this nightmare, this chapter of her life, was over. Outside, the night was cold, but for the first time in months, my daughter was free. Tessa sat across from Detective Morgan in a small room at the police station. Her hands trembled as she held a cup of cold coffee, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady. She told him everything. Every lie Adam had told her. Every way he'd controlled her finances, monitored her phone, dictated who she could see. Every moment she'd been terrified to speak, to move to exist without permission. She described the isolation, how friendships dissolved, how her job became impossible, how she'd slowly disappeared from her own life. 15 months of psychological manipulation laid bare in painful detail. Then, almost whispering, she revealed something she had told no one: she was pregnant, only a few weeks along, and terrified Adam would use the baby to trap her. The detective's pen stopped. He wrote the rest slowly, his expression darkening. "This is serious," he said when she finished. "False imprisonment, coercive control, psychological abuse. We have a strong case." I watched my daughter nod, and I saw something I'd been waiting months to see, a spark of understanding that none of this was her fault. 3 months later, we stood in a Seattle courtroom. James Richardson stood beside Tessa, calm and prepared. Across the room, Adam sat with his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who kept whispering strategy. The judge entered, stern, composed, familiar with cases like this. Adam's lawyer argued first. He insisted she could have left, claimed the door wasn't locked, suggested her fears were exaggerated. He painted it as a troubled marriage, not a crime. When he finished, James Richardson rose. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "false imprisonment isn't always physical. It's psychological captivity. My client was monitored constantly. She had no money, her husband controlled every decision, no job, he convinced her to quit. She was isolated from every source of support. Friends, family, all removed." He paused. "That is not a difficult marriage. That's a crime. and Ms. Bradley's early pregnancy made her even more vulnerable. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Thorne," she said, looking directly at Adam, "do you have anything to say?" Adam's jaw tightened. He stayed silent. The judge nodded. "Based on the evidence, Detective Morgan's report and the testimony provided, this court grants divorce on the grounds of domestic violence and psychological abuse. The property at 2847 Ballard Avenue remains the sole property of Tessa Marie Bradley. Full custody of any children born of this marriage goes to Ms. Bradley. Mr. Thorne will pay child support as required. A permanent restraining order is issued. No contact, no communication." The gavel fell sharp and final. Adam stood, shock flickering across his face. His lawyer whispered urgently, but he didn't hear him. He stared at Tessa. She met his eyes without fear for the first time. Not anger, clarity. Outside the courthouse, Tessa walked down the marble steps holding the divorce papers. The Seattle sun felt too bright after months of darkness. Wind lifted her hair, and for a moment she looked like herself again. She found me waiting. We didn't speak. We just held each other. She cried, not fear, not despair, but release, survival. "It's over, Dad," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "Now the healing begins." That night she slept at my apartment for the first time in nearly 2 years. She fell asleep on my couch beneath a blanket I'd bought back when I didn't know if she would survive this. I sat beside her, hand on her shoulder, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. For the first time since Angela's warning call 3 years earlier, I felt something close to peace. The nightmare was finished. My daughter was free. And within that freedom, her baby new life waited to arrive. Even as she slept, I could see how exhaustion clung to her, the kind that settles into a person after years of being afraid to breathe. Yet beneath it, there was something new taking shape, a steadiness, a quiet resolve. She wasn't just escaping anymore. She was rebuilding. She was protecting the child growing inside her, a child conceived in darkness, but now carried into the light. I realized then that freedom wasn't just the absence of Adam. It was the beginning of a life where she finally belonged to herself again, and she deserved every moment of it. 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Tessa gave birth to Aurora on a Tuesday morning in late spring. When the nurse placed that tiny girl in my arms, I broke down completely. She was perfect. Completely, impossibly perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, eyes that hadn't yet learned what the world could do to them, and she was free. Tessa lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. "She's here, Dad," she whispered. "Aurora is here." I looked at my daughter, then at my granddaughter, and finally understood why I'd sold everything. Why I'd sacrificed my wife's jewelry, our car, my pride, my sleep. Why I'd sat in a car watching a dark house at midnight. "And she's free," I said. "She'll never know what it feels like to ask permission to exist." 3 weeks later, Tessa came home to the Ballard house. She moved through those rooms, slowly touching walls, like she was reacquainting herself with freedom. Aurora slept upstairs, and Tessa found herself in the garden, the one she'd never had time to notice during those dark months. She sat on the bench I'd bought for her, and she laughed. It was a real laugh, not the careful, controlled sound she'd perfected during her marriage, not the exhausted courtesy of a woman pretending to be okay. It was genuine, unguarded, hers. I watched her from the kitchen window, and I felt something I'd been carrying loosen inside my chest. My daughter was coming back to herself. 3 months after Aurora's birth, Tessa returned to work. She went back to the marketing firm where she'd first become herself, before Adam, before isolation, before the invisible cage. Her boss called her into his office on her first day back. "Tessa," he said, "we want you to know how much we valued having you here, and we want to value you more." He offered her a promotion, creative strategy director, full autonomy, a significant raise. Tessa accepted without hesitation. For the first time in nearly 3 years, she had control over her own future. She arranged childcare. She built a routine. She remembered what it felt like to be needed for her talents, not owned for her compliance. One afternoon, while Tessa was reorganizing the garden with Aurora playing nearby, a man approached. Jacob Turner, a teacher at Aurora's daycare. He was kind in the way genuinely kind people are. He asked Tessa's opinion. He listened to her answers. He never decided anything for her. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" he asked carefully. "Only if you want to. No pressure." Tessa looked at him, really looked at him, at his gentle eyes, at the way he stood back and gave her space instead of closing in. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like to see where this goes." What struck me most was how easily she said it, not asking permission, not overthinking, just making a choice about her own life. One evening I came by the Ballard house to visit Aurora. I found Tessa in the garden, my granddaughter on her lap, both of them golden in the sunset. Tessa looked up at me and I saw it clearly, the woman my daughter was always meant to be. Strong, independent, capable, radiant. "How are you feeling?" I asked, sitting beside them. "Like myself again, Dad," she said. "Like I'm allowed to be happy." I looked at the house behind us. The house I'd sacrificed everything to buy. The house that had become more than shelter. It had become a symbol, a promise, a second chance. "That house saved your life," I said quietly. Tessa shook her head. "No, Dad, you saved my life. But this house gave me permission to live it." One afternoon I sat on the bench in the Ballard garden watching Tessa play with Aurora. Flowers were blooming, the sun was warm, and my daughter was smiling. Jacob Turner arrived with coffee for both of us, a small kindness, nothing more. He sat beside me, giving Tessa space, never demanding her attention. That's what I noticed most about him. He understood that love meant stepping back sometimes. Tessa held Aurora up, pointing at the garden. "Look at the flowers, baby. They only bloom when they're free to grow." Aurora laughed, a clear, fearless sound that echoed through the garden. Tessa set her daughter down and watched her explore the grass. Then she turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd been waiting months to see clarity. "Do you know what's special about this house, Aurora?" Tessa asked, kneeling beside her daughter. Aurora shook her head, concentrating on a flower. "It's yours," Tessa said. "Only yours. And when you grow up, no one can take it from you." She paused, letting that sink in not just for Aurora, but for herself. "You're going to have choices, baby," Tessa continued. "Always choices. About where you live, who you love, how you spend your days. Choices." I felt tears building behind my eyes. Tessa looked up at me and she nodded slowly, like she was finally saying something she'd been holding inside for a long time. "That's what your grandpa gave me, Aurora," she said. "Not just a house. Freedom." She stood and pulled me into a hug. I could feel her strength now, not the fragile survival strength of someone enduring, but the solid strength of someone who'd found herself again. Jacob's hand rested gently on her shoulder. Not possessive, not controlling, just present. "I'm proud of you," I whispered to Tessa. "So proud." "I know," she said, and she meant it. She wasn't waiting for external validation anymore. She knew her own worth. I watched them there in the garden, my daughter, my granddaughter, and a man who understood that loving someone meant letting them be free. 3 generations of women, one who'd taught her daughter about independence through sacrifice, one who'd fought her way back to freedom, and one who would never have to fight at all. My work was done. Tessa didn't need me to save her anymore. She could save herself. I stood to leave, ready to go home and rest. My bones ached. My heart felt lighter than it had in years. "Dad, wait," Tessa called out. "I need to tell you something." I turned back, wondering what else my strong, beautiful daughter needed to say. Tessa caught up to me at the garden gate. She grabbed my hand, something she hadn't done freely in so long, and held it tight. "I need Dad to know one thing," she said. I turned to face my daughter, and I saw her clearly strong, free herself. "That Maid uniform," Tessa said. "The one Diane put in that box. The one she expected me to wear. I never wore it, Dad. And I never will." "I know, sweetheart. But that's not what I wanted to tell you," Tessa continued. Her eyes were steady. "I wanted to tell you that you gave me more than just a house. You gave me a message." She squeezed my hand. "You told me I had choices, that I had an escape route, that I mattered, that I deserved protection, that I was free." I felt tears come, but I let them. There was no shame in a father crying for his daughter. "You always deserved that, Tessa," I said. "You always deserved all of it." She pulled me into a hug, and I could feel the strength in her, the solid, unbreakable strength of a woman who'd fought her way back to herself. As I drove away from the Ballard house that evening, I found myself thinking about all the questions people had asked me over the past year. Did a house really save her? Was buying property enough? The answer I'd learned was no. It wasn't the house. It was the message the house carried. You have choices. You have an escape route. You matter. Those were the words that saved my daughter. Not the square footage or the view or the legal deed. The message. Freedom doesn't come free. It costs sacrifice. It costs time. It costs the jewelry your wife wore for 40 years. It costs the car you maintained with your own hands. It costs 3 months of exhaustion and borrowed courage, but it's worth every penny. I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time before turning the corner. Tessa was back in the garden with Aurora and Jacob. My granddaughter was laughing a clear, fearless sound, the kind of laughter that only children who've never been afraid can make. My daughter was teaching her daughter what I'd taught her, that freedom isn't negotiable, that choices aren't luxuries, that every woman deserves to know from the moment she enters this world that she has options. That Maid uniform would never be worn, and that I realized was the greatest victory a father could ever know. Not that I'd won against Adam, not that justice had been served, though it had, but that 3 generations of women would now know, with absolute certainty, that they were free, and that freedom, hard-won, expensive, precious, would continue forward. My daughter would teach my granddaughter, and my granddaughter would teach hers, breaking the cycle, protecting each other, choosing love over control always. As I drove home through Seattle's quiet evening streets, I understood something fundamental. I hadn't just saved my daughter's life. I'd given her the tools to save herself. And she was already teaching her daughter how to do the same. That was legacy. That was everything. My name is Benson Bradley, and this is my true story. For years, I watched my daughter disappear into a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I told myself she'd figure it out. I was wrong. So don't be like me. Don't wait. If someone you love is being controlled, manipulated, isolated, speak up. Your grandpa's stories might save a life. Your willingness to listen might be the escape route someone desperately needs. This true story taught me one profound lesson. Freedom isn't free. It costs sacrifice. It costs time. It costs everything you're willing to give for someone you love. But God doesn't create us to live in cages. He creates us to choose, to flourish, to be free. When my granddaughter Aurora laughed in that garden, fearless, unafraid, I understood why I'd given everything. Because 3 generations of women would now know they had choices. That true story of Tessa's escape became my mission to share with the world. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. They're hope. They're proof that it's never too late to fight back. If you recognize yourself in this true story, if you're trapped, controlled, or afraid, please reach out. You deserve freedom. You deserve choice. You deserve to laugh without fear. Comment below. Share this story. Subscribe to our channel for more real, raw stories that matter. Because every grandpa story has the power to save someone. Every true story deserves to be heard. You ever have your own son look you in the eye on Thanksgiving and tell you to get out of his home? I have. All because I said one honest sentence during his wife's live stream. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Apologize to my wife or leave." I stood up calm as ever and smiled, because what he didn't know was that my next words wouldn't just silence the entire dining room. They would shatter the entire fantasy world he thought he was living in. Before I tell you what happened in that Chicago penthouse, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching this from. But let me back up a bit. It was 4 o'clock on a cold Chicago afternoon when I stepped out of the elevator onto the 40th floor of one of those glass towers downtown. The hallway alone probably cost more than my house. Marble floors so shiny you could shave in them, and artwork that looked like someone sneezed on a canvas and called it genius. My son David answered the door wearing a suit that probably cost more than I used to make in a month back in my plumbing days. "Dad, you made it." He pulled me into one of those quick, nervous hugs that felt more like a business handshake. The kid was wound tighter than a $2 watch. "Wouldn't miss it, son," I said, stepping into what I can only describe as a magazine spread come to life. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the whole city spread out below like a glittering carpet. The place was decorated for Thanksgiving, but not the kind I remembered from when David was growing up. This was all imported this and artisanal that. "Let me introduce you to everyone." David said, his voice carrying that forced cheer you hear at used car lots. The living room was full of people who looked like they'd stepped off a movie set. There was Madison, some lifestyle blogger with perfectly straight hair and a smile that never moved. Brad and Jennifer, who David whispered, were potential clients. And Marcus, a photographer adjusting professional lighting equipment like he was preparing for a magazine shoot. "Everyone, this is my father, Tony," David announced. I caught the way their eyes swept over my simple khakis and flannel shirt. Not mean exactly, but calculating. Like they were trying to figure out how I fit into their world of designer labels and perfect teeth. Sophia glided over in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Everything about her was camera-ready. The kind of woman who looked like she was always posing for a picture that might be taken. Tony, I'm so excited you're here for our special Thanksgiving celebration. Special. That word should have been my first warning. David launched into what I can only call a tour, but it felt more like a sales pitch. Dad, check out this dining table. It's reclaimed wood from a 16th century monastery in Italy. He ran his hand along the surface like he was petting a prize horse. And this chandelier, hand-blown glass from Venice. I nodded and made the appropriate impressed sounds, but my eyes were wandering to things David wasn't pointing out, like the stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter that he quickly moved when he saw me looking, or the way his smile tightened every time his phone buzzed. In my old business, you learn to read people and situations. Rich folks' houses were my bread and butter for 30 years, and I knew the difference between real wealth and the kind that was all for show. The guests were circled around Sophia, now watching her arrange professional camera equipment with surgical precision. Ring lights, fancy microphones, multiple cameras. This wasn't just dinner, this was a production. Sophia's got 50,000 followers. Brad was saying like he was talking about the gross national product of a small country. Her Thanksgiving content always goes viral. It's all about authenticity, Sophia said, adjusting a light. People want to see real family moments, real gratitude, real success. Real, another word that should have set off alarm bells. I was standing there trying to process this whole scene when I noticed something that made my contractor instincts kick in. Those expensive decorations Sophia was positioning so carefully, the antique candlesticks, had price stickers on the bottom that she'd missed. As I watched Sophia position her cameras perfectly, I noticed something about those expensive decorations that didn't quite add up. What I thought would be a simple family dinner turned into the most elaborate show I'd ever witnessed. Within minutes, that dining room transformed into a Hollywood set. Ring lights blazed like miniature suns, casting everything in perfect artificial glow. Sophia moved with director-level confidence, adjusting angles and checking her phone. "We're going live in 60 seconds, she announced, her voice suddenly professional. "Remember, we're showcasing gratitude, success, and family values. Keep it natural but aspirational. Natural but aspirational. In 30 years fixing pipes in rich folks' homes, I'd seen plenty of put-on shows, but nothing like this." David straightened his perfect tie, taking position at the table's head. Guests arranged themselves like a family portrait. I stood there awkwardly wondering where I fit into this choreography. And we're live. Sophia's entire demeanor shifted. Her smile became radiant voice, warm and inviting. "Happy Thanksgiving, beautiful souls." Welcome back to Sophia's Sanctuary, where we celebrate the finer things with gratitude and grace. The viewer count climbed on her screen. 20,000, 30,000, 45,000 people watching us eat dinner. Back in my day, if 45,000 people wanted to watch you eat, you'd call the police. I'm so blessed to be in our Chicago penthouse with my amazing husband David and closest friends. Sophia continued gesturing like a game show host. And we have a very special guest, David's father Tony, our family patriarch. Family patriarch, never been called that before. The camera swung toward me. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I managed giving an awkward wave. Sophia was already moving on, showcasing the spread like a cooking show host. We're featuring heritage turkey from Vermont, $28 per pound, with organic sides from local artisan producers. These sweet potatoes are made with Madagascar vanilla and imported French butter. The live chat exploded, hearts floating up, comments flying. Goals, living my dream, relationship envy. Madison leaned into frame. Tell them about the wine selection. We're featuring a 2018 Bordeaux from our private collection. Sophia glowed. It's been aging in our temperature-controlled wine cellar. David nodded seriously. The terroir really comes through. You can taste the limestone in the soil. I'd drunk plenty of wine with screw tops. I knew when someone was laying it on thick. The guests played their parts perfectly, chiming in about incredible attention to detail and Sophia's impeccable taste. Like watching an expensive commercial where everyone sold the same product. The idea that this was how successful people lived. As we share what we're grateful for, Sophia said, remember that gratitude is the foundation of abundance. When my turn came, I spoke from the heart. I'm grateful for family, for watching my son build a life, even if it's fancier than I ever imagined. I'm grateful for the years when it was just him and me learning what really mattered. The camera lingered on me. Something flickered across David's face. Maybe recognition, maybe guilt. But Sophia steered back to their incredible journey and this blessed moment. The chat kept exploding with admiration. People were eating this up, living vicariously through this performance, buying into this vision of the perfect life. That's when it hit me. Sitting under those blazing lights, watching my son perform gratitude instead of feeling it, everything was calculated for the camera. The seating, the lighting, even how David held his wine glass. Nothing spontaneous, nothing real. Then Sophia reached for her most prized possession to show the audience. Sometimes one innocent observation can bring down an entire house of cards. The Hermes Birkin bag sat on the sideboard like a museum piece, and Sophia's eyes lit up as she moved toward it. The viewer count had climbed past 50,000, and I could feel the energy in the room shift as everyone sensed this was the big moment. Now I want to share something really special with you all, Sophia said, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial tone influencers use when they're about to reveal their biggest secret. She lifted the bag with both hands like she was handling the crown jewels. This is my Hermes Birkin in Togo leather etoupe colorway. The guests leaned forward and I heard Jennifer actually gasp. Brad pulled out his phone to take pictures and Madison was already typing notes for her own content, no doubt. This particular piece, Sophia continued turning the bag slowly for the camera, took me 2 years on the waiting list. 2 years. You can't just walk into Hermes and buy a Birkin. They have to choose you. She ran her fingers along the leather with genuine reverence. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Each bag takes 18 hours to hand-stitch by a single artisan in Paris. The live chat was going absolutely wild. $sign emojis, fire symbols, comments streaming by so fast they were just a blur of excitement. The retail price was $15,000, Sophia said, pausing for effect, but honestly it's already appreciated in value. These bags are better investments than stocks. 15,000, Madison breathed. Sophia, you're living the dream. It's not just a bag. David jumped in, playing his supportive husband role perfectly. It's a piece of art. It's legacy. The guests were practically drooling over this thing, and the online audience was eating it up. Comments about goals and inspiration and how they were saving up for their own Birkin someday. That's when my mouth got me in trouble. Huh, I said, squinting at the bag. That's funny. I could swear I saw that exact same bag at the outlet mall in Schaumburg last weekend. Same color, same size, had a big sale sign on it. $200. The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before a car crash. I kept talking because apparently I hadn't done enough damage yet. I remember thinking it was a nice-looking purse. My neighbor Betty was looking at one just like it. Of course, I figured it was one of those knockoff things they sell at the outlets. You know how they make those designer-looking bags for folks who can't afford the real deal. Sophia's face went through about 6 different colors in the span of 3 seconds. The guests exchanged glances that could have cut glass. David looked like he was about to throw up. But the real fireworks were happening online. The chat had exploded into chaos. Fake outlet mall called out. The hearts and fire emojis had been replaced by skull faces and crying, laughing symbols. That's impossible. Sophia stammered, her camera-perfect composure cracking like ice in spring. This is authenticated. I have the receipt. But it was too late. Screenshots were already being shared. People were posting links to outlet stores. Someone had found the exact bag online for $199. You know what? Sophia said, her voice shaking slightly as she reached for her phone. I think we're going to wrap up today's stream a little early. Thank you all for joining us for this special Thanksgiving. The comments were brutal. Now. Busted. Fake life. 15,000 my ass. She stabbed at her phone and the red recording light finally went dark. The camera stopped rolling, but the real drama was about to begin. Watching those guests make their excuses and leave told me everything I needed to know. Madison was first to bolt. Oh my gosh, look at the time, she said suddenly, interested in her Apple Watch. I totally forgot I have a dinner thing with my family. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door faster than a cat with its tail caught in a mousetrap. Photographer Marcus followed, mumbling about another shoot across town. Within 10 minutes, the place had cleared except for Brad and Jennifer, who huddled by the windows pretending to admire the city view while obviously discussing what they'd witnessed. David paced the living room like a caged animal, running hands through his hair, checking his phone constantly. "This is a disaster," he muttered. "An absolute disaster." Sophia planted herself on the white leather couch, tears flowing, the kind designed to be seen. "My career is ruined," she sobbed. 5 years building my brand, and it's gone because of one comment. One careless, thoughtless comment. She looked up with mascara-streaked eyes, and I felt something twist in my gut. I'd taught David that when you make a mistake, you own it. You don't blame others for telling the truth. "I didn't mean any harm," I said quietly. "I was just making conversation." Conversation. David spun around, face flushed red. "Dad, do you have any idea what you've done? Sophia's got brand partnerships, sponsorship deals. People depend on her image being perfect." "Perfect," I repeated. "Built on a lie." That's when David really lost it. "It's not a lie? So what if she got a good deal on a bag that doesn't make her fake?" But even as he said it, I could see he didn't believe his own words. The kid I'd raised knew the difference between getting a good deal and pretending you'd paid $15,000 for something that cost $200. Brad and Jennifer tried looking invisible, but their ears were stretched in our direction. This was better than cable TV. "My followers trusted me," Sophia continued, voice getting higher. "They looked up to me. Now they're calling me a fraud, sharing screenshots, making memes. I'm being torn apart online because your father couldn't keep his mouth shut." "Now hold on," I started, but David cut me off. "No, Dad, she's right." He stood between us now, protecting her from me. "You came into our home, our celebration, and embarrassed my wife in front of 50,000 people. Our home, our celebration, like I was some stranger who'd wandered in. I raised you better than this son," I said. "I raised you to value honesty over appearances. You raised me in a 2-bedroom apartment above a pizza shop." David shot back, voice getting louder. "You raised me to fix pipes and be satisfied with scraps. Well, I wanted more. We have more. And I won't let you drag us back down to your level." Those words hit like a physical blow. Brad and Jennifer weren't even pretending to look away anymore. "David," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that's not who you are." "This is exactly who I am," he shouted, gesturing around the penthouse. "This is what I've built. This is the life I've made." Sophia was still crying, but watching David with something like satisfaction. Like this was exactly what she'd been waiting for. "You want to stay in my house?" David's voice shook. "You want to be part of this family? Then you apologize to my wife. Apologize for humiliating her, for destroying her reputation, for ruining everything she's worked for." The room went dead quiet, except for Sophia's sniffling and distant Chicago traffic 40 floors below. "Apologize to my wife, or get out of my house." I stood there looking at my son, and for the first time in 35 years, I didn't recognize him. There comes a moment in every father's life when he has to choose between keeping peace and keeping his dignity. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Every eye in that room was fixed on me. David stood with his chest puffed out, waiting for me to fold, like I always had when he was a kid throwing tantrums. Sophia had stopped crying just long enough to watch my reaction, her instincts sharp as a hawk's. Brad and Jennifer had given up any pretense of privacy. They were witnessing a family civil war. 15 seconds passed, then 30. David's foot started tapping against the marble floor, a nervous habit he'd had since he was 12. The same kid who used to run to me when he skinned his knee, who'd beg for one more bedtime story, who'd proudly show me every report card like it was treasure. "Well," David's voice cracked slightly, "I'm waiting for an answer, Dad." But I wasn't ready to give him one yet. In my 68 years, I'd learned that the biggest decisions deserve more than knee-jerk reactions. I'd made plenty of those in younger days, quick choices I'd regretted for years. This wasn't going to be one of them. I thought about nights I'd worked double shifts to keep us afloat after his mother died, times I'd gone without new work boots so David could have school clothes that fit, parent-teacher conferences where I'd sit in tiny plastic chairs still in work clothes, listening to teachers tell me what a bright, respectful boy I'd raised. Respectful. That word echoed in my mind now. Dad. David's impatience was growing, but something else crept into his voice. Uncertainty, maybe. Like he was realizing this wasn't going as expected. I looked around that penthouse. at the imported marble designer furniture, the view that cost more per month than most people made in a year. Then I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw past the expensive suit to the scared little boy underneath. The one who'd gotten so caught up in playing dress-up that he'd forgotten who he really was. Sophia shifted on the couch, and I caught something in her expression that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just watching, she was calculating. This woman had turned my son into a performer in his own life, and now she was waiting to see if her puppet would dance when she pulled the strings. That's when I felt it. Something deep in my chest, rising like steam from a kettle. It wasn't anger exactly, though there was plenty of that. It was something older, stronger. The same feeling I'd had when I'd started my plumbing business, with nothing but a rusty truck and a toolbox full of determination. The same steel that had gotten me through 30 years of crawling under houses and fixing other people's problems while building something honest and real. Brad whispered something to Jennifer, and she nodded, both leaning forward slightly. They sensed the shift in the room's energy, even if they couldn't put their finger on what was changing. I stood up slowly, taking my time, feeling every one of my 68 years in my joints, but also feeling something else, a strength I hadn't tapped into for a long time. David's eyes widened slightly as I rose to my full height, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to look up at me like I could move mountains. "You want an apology, son?" I said, my voice steady and calm in a way that surprised even me. "You'll get one." What I said next changed everything they thought they knew about me. "I'm sorry, David, that I let you live in a fantasy for so long." The words came out calm and measured, but they hit that room like a thunderclap. David's mouth opened slightly, his brow furrowing as he tried to process what kind of apology this was supposed to be. This wasn't the groveling he'd expected from his old man. "I'm sorry," I continued, my voice carrying a weight it hadn't held in years, "that I let you think I was just some broke plumber who got lucky with a few repair jobs." Sophia's tear-streaked face went very still. Brad and Jennifer exchanged glances, suddenly paying attention in a way they hadn't before. Something in my tone had shifted the entire energy of the room. "Dad, what are you talking about?" David's voice was smaller now, uncertain. "I'm talking about the truth, son. The truth I should have shared with you years ago." I walked over to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline I'd helped build. "When you were growing up, I didn't want you to know about the money. I wanted you to learn the value of hard work, to understand that respect is earned, not bought." I turned back to face the room. "I'm sorry I let you believe I was struggling to make ends meet while you were building this lifestyle." "What money?" David's voice cracked. "Dad, you live in that same little house. You drive that old truck." "I drive that truck because I like it. I live in that house because it's home. But David, do you have any idea how many buildings I've worked on in this city? How many property deals I've been part of over 30 years? The room was dead silent except for the distant hum of traffic far below. "I'm sorry I never told you about the investment properties, the commercial real estate partnerships, the building contracts that came my way because people knew Tony Ricci did honest work." I paused, letting that sink in. "I'm sorry I let you think I was poor while you were racking up debt, trying to impress people who don't matter." David's face went pale. "Debt? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the credit cards you've maxed out, the business loans you can't make payments on, the mortgage on this place that you're 3 months behind on." My voice stayed steady, factual. "I'm sorry I've been watching you struggle and pretend instead of teaching you that there's no shame in asking family for help." Brad's mouth was hanging open now. Jennifer was staring at me like I'd just revealed I was Superman. Sophia looked like she'd seen a ghost. "How do you—" David started, then stopped. "How do I know, son, when you can't make your mortgage payments, the bank calls the cosigner. When you default on business loans, they contact the guarantor. I've been covering for you for 2 years, hoping you'd come to your senses and ask for help instead of digging deeper into this hole." The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry I enabled this charade by keeping you afloat financially while you pretended to be something you're not." I looked directly at Sophia, whose calculating expression had been replaced by fear. "I'm sorry I let you both think you were fooling anyone." David slumped into one of those expensive chairs like all the air had gone out of him. You've been paying our bills. Not all of them. Just the ones that would have put you on the street." I walked back toward the center of the room, feeling the power dynamic, shifting with every step. But most of all, David, I'm sorry I never mentioned that I own this building. But that wasn't the only thing I'd been keeping from my son. The silence in that room was deafening as the pieces started falling into place. David stared at me like I'd just told him the sky was green. Brad and Jennifer looked like they were watching their favorite TV show finale. Sophia had gone from calculating to panic. You own the building, David repeated slowly. You own this building. 42 floors of prime Chicago real estate. Bought it in foreclosure 15 years ago. Good investment, as it turns out. David's mind was working, connecting dots he'd never looked for. The mortgage payments. When we were late. There is no mortgage, son. You're paying rent. Rent I've been covering when you couldn't make it. I sat across from him. I'm sorry I let you believe you were a homeowner when you're actually my tenant. Jennifer whispered to Brad, Oh my God. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is watching you spiral deeper into debt while putting on this show for strangers. Sophia found her voice. You've been spying on us. When someone can't pay their bills, the people they owe call the guarantor. I know about every credit card, every business loan, because I'm the one banks come to when you can't pay. David's hands shook. How much, what? How much do we owe? How much have you covered? I looked at my son and saw the scared little boy who used to have nightmares about being poor. David, in 2 years, I've covered $87,000 in missed payments. Credit cards, business loans, this apartment, that fancy car. Without my backing, you'd have lost everything 18 months ago. The number hit like a physical blow. Brad stepped backward. Jennifer's hand covered her mouth. 87,000, David whispered. Not counting monthly rent I've been waiving because you couldn't afford it. I leaned forward. Son, your entire lifestyle. This apartment designer clothes, fancy dinners you post online. It's all been subsidized by the broke plumber you told to get out. Sophia was doing math, and I saw the moment she realized how deep they were buried. I'm sorry I enabled this lie by paying your bills for 2 years while you pretended to be successful. I'm sorry I didn't make you face reality sooner. David buried his face in his hands. Why didn't you tell me? Because I hoped you'd figure it out. I hoped you'd remember the values I taught you. I hoped you'd choose honesty over appearances. I glanced at Sophia, who was calculating something different now. I hoped my son would ask for help instead of building his life on lies. The expensive decorations looked cheap and desperate now. The view seemed less impressive when you knew it was borrowed money and borrowed time. Every brand partnership, every sponsorship deal, every success post, built on money you didn't earn living in a place you don't own, pretending to be people you're not. Brad and Jennifer edged toward the door, uncomfortable but unable to leave. I'm sorry that I enabled this lie by paying your bills for 2 years. David looked up with red-rimmed, lost eyes. Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet, son, because the biggest secret wasn't mine to tell, it was Sophia's. What came out next didn't just end their marriage, it ended their entire world. Sophia looked like a cornered animal, her makeup streaked with tears that had suddenly become real. The calculating look was gone, replaced by desperation. What secret? She said, voice shaking. Tony, I don't know what you're talking about. I looked at her sadly. Sophia, how long have you known that I've been paying your bills? The question hung like a blade. David's head snapped up, eyes moving between us. Brad and Jennifer stopped pretending they weren't listening. I don't. Sophia started, but the words died. Because I've got the bank records. Every payment, every loan I've guaranteed. And I've got the emails, Sophia. The ones you sent to the bank routing payment confirmations to your email instead of his. David went still. What emails? Sophia's face crumbled. David, I can explain. She's known for 18 months, I said heavily. She's known I was keeping you afloat financially, and she's been managing it, making sure you never found out where the money came from. The mortgage company called you, David said slowly. Last month, when I was in Seattle, you said it was a billing error. It was my office confirming payment schedule, I said. She's been coordinating with my accountant to make the timing look right, to make you think your business was successful when it was failing. Brad and Jennifer took another step toward the door. Every month she'd get missed payment notices. Every month she'd forward them to my office with instructions on handling it so you wouldn't know. I looked at my son. She turned your father into a silent partner in your fake success story. Sophia? David's voice was barely a whisper. Tell me he's lying. But Sophia couldn't meet his eyes. David, you have to understand. We were building something. The brand, the lifestyle. I knew if you found out about money problems, you'd want to scale back. But we were so close to making it real. Making it real by lying to me, by using my father's money while I humiliated him. I was protecting our future. Sophia shot back desperately. Your father has real money. I thought if we built the brand big enough, we could pay him back and never need help again. You thought you could use my generosity to fund your fantasy until it became reality, I said quietly. It would have worked. We were getting bigger sponsorships, more followers. In another year, we could have been financially independent. Built on a lie, David said flatly. Our entire relationship, our marriage, all built on you lying to me about who was paying for it. The silence was different now. This wasn't tension. This was something breaking that couldn't be fixed. David walked to the window, staring out at city lights. When he turned back, his face was different, older, sadder, but clearer. Sophia, pack your things, he said steadily. This marriage is over. Then he looked at me and I saw the son I'd raised. Dad, I'm so sorry. For everything. For how I treated you, for choosing her lies over your truth. I felt something tight in my chest loosen. David. No, let me finish. You've been taking care of me my whole life, and I repaid you by throwing you out of your own building for telling the truth. His voice cracked. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. What happened next surprised all of us. 3 weeks later, I learned what Thanksgiving really means. The smell of regular grocery store turkey filled my little kitchen. David sat at my table sleeves, rolled up peeling potatoes, like I'd taught him when he was 12. Remember when you used to complain about this? I asked. I remember thinking it was beneath me, he said quietly. Funny how perspective changes. After Sophia moved back to Connecticut, David had surprised everyone by asking to move in with me. Just temporarily, he'd said, until he figured out his next steps. Those steps became working in my real business, property management for my 17 Chicago buildings. Word had gotten out about the fake lifestyle. Sophia's influencer career was over her remaining brand. Partnerships canceled her followers down to a few thousand die-hard supporters who still believed her victim narrative. My neighbor Betty knocked on the back door with green bean casserole. Hope you saved room for one more dish. Always room at this table, Betty. Mike from the hardware store arrived with his wife Carol, followed by the Johnsons. 7 people around my kitchen table, that seats 6, but nobody minded the folding chair from the garage. This is how we used to do it, I told David, before everything had to be perfect for an audience. The conversation flowed naturally. Neighborhood stories, gentle teasing Carol's grandbaby pictures, real talk between real people who'd known each other for years. When sharing gratitude, David spoke last. I'm grateful for a father who loved me enough to let me fail, who caught me when I fell, even when I didn't deserve it. He looked at me. Dad, I'm grateful you never gave up on teaching me what really matters. Betty dabbed her eyes. Mike cleared his throat. Carol squeezed David's hand. I'm grateful I learned the difference between having an audience and having a family. Between performing gratitude and feeling it. Between building a brand and building a life. Later, cleaning dishes together, no cameras, just father and son with dish towels, David asked, Dad, would you teach me the real business? I want to build something honest, something that lasts. Son, I thought you'd never ask. That evening on my front porch, David said, You know the real difference between that dinner 3 weeks ago and tonight. Tonight, nobody was performing. Tonight was just real. I looked at my son and saw the man I'd always hoped he'd become. Not perfect, not wealthy, not famous. Just honest, grateful, and real. If you're listening to this story, here's what I learned. Authenticity isn't a brand strategy. It's a life choice. Choose people who love you when cameras are off. Choose gratitude over performance. Choose family over followers. Because the only audience that really matters is sitting around your table sharing your food, loving you exactly as you are. Looking back at my story, I realized God gave me a second chance to rebuild what really mattered. Don't make my mistake of staying silent when your family loses their way. These grandpa stories teach us that sometimes love means saying the hard truth even when it hurts. My true story isn't unique. Many fathers watch their children chase fake success while forgetting real values. But God blessed me with the courage to stand up when it counted. This true story reminds us that authentic relationships matter more than social media followers. The lesson from these grandpa stories: wealth without wisdom is worthless. Money can't buy respect, but honesty always pays dividends. God knows the difference between performing gratitude and feeling it, and so do the people who truly love you. If this true story touched your heart, I'd love to hear about your own family challenges in the comments below. Share this message with someone who needs to remember that real love doesn't need an audience. And don't forget to subscribe for more grandpa stories that remind us what truly matters in life.